All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. Going to do another book chat today. Of course, I am, well, you can't see my full name that I created for this episode in here, but I coincidentally created the same type of name for myself as Dusty. I am Andrew, aka Mindgasms Forger, and we got woke centrist Forger, aka Dusty Cubes, aka Dustin Cubit, and we got Mask AKA Tristram, and we are talking about The Emperor's Soul from Arcanum Unbounded, the short story collection by Brandon Sanderson, who is of course the author of the Mistborn series, which we've talked about before in the Stormlight Archive, and he's the co-author of I think it's the final 2 or 3 Wheel of Time books after Robert Jordan died.
Yep.
And is involved with the new Wheel of Time TV show, which we've discussed in detail on Dusty's channel. And anyway, The Emperor's Soul is basically about a thief who can forge objects and seemingly perhaps living things as well with magical powers and new versions of them with magic powers. And so she gets kidnapped by the dying emperor's soldiers and imprisoned so that she can make a new soul for him. And so she's doing that while also secretly plotting her escape. And of course, this is interesting because I believe I could be wrong, but I think this is the only story that takes place on this particular planet with this particular magic system, which is why, and I think it was a good idea for you to suggest that we talk about each of these 3 short stories that we're going to talk about separately, Tristram, along with Silence for Shadows and the Force of Hell and Six of the Dusk, because it has the separate planet and separate magic system on here. So it'll be really interesting to get into that. So I guess to start off with, because this one was the one that you chose, Tristram, why is this one your favorite story? And also, let's just start off with that.
I think of anything that is shorter than a novel, I think this is the greatest piece of fictional writing I've ever read. But I think that for several reasons. One, the premise of the plot I think is excellent. So this person who's broken in, this theft has happened previous to the book starting. So there's some pregnant information that has happened and that we're given hints of, but never fully understand in the plot, which is really cool because it gives the idea of I'm constantly trying to outthink Shai, who is the thief. And I'm also trying to outthink Gautona, who is the main arbiter that we see interacting with her. It's got a very, very small cast. And so there's only a few, very, very few characters that we actually have to get to know, which I think is really interesting. What can you do with a few characters? And so like a short play, I think it gives you that intensity of how much can I get out of these characters and how much can I imply in a short period of time. I love the ticking clock. Okay, I think you're thinking it can't be a thriller. She does like 90% of the entire book is in one cell, so it's not a thriller, but it has almost that feeling of, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Because they tell her you got 100 days. There's been an assassination attempt on the emperor. His wife was killed. We can keep him in seclusion for 100 days of mourning. At the end of that, we've got to produce an emperor, or if we don't, it's succession. We're out of power. So all of their power, the most powerful people in this emperor, the emperor is unconscious and in a coma, are reliant on her to do this. If she can do this, they can maintain power. And it's clear that if they down, she's dead. So they give her 100 days to get this done. Even if she succeeds, she thinks they'll probably kill her. So she's like, I know I need to escape, but unless it looks like I'm working on this, they won't let me live. They'll just kill me early. So you've got multiple threats. She has to do what they think is wrong to save them in a way that is illegal while pretending to everyone else that she isn't doing so. And at the same time, without seeming to, really be working on her escape plan rather than this. And I think that just makes a really intense, fantastically interesting plot. And the magic system, forging, is just amazing. One of the cool things about forging is just to give it as a brief idea, it's what if using magic you could rewrite something's past. That is the core. So it lived a different past and then appears to be something completely different. Now, these forgeries, if they're going to take, in other words, last, they have to be close enough to the thing's real past. And I think that's really clever, because one of the things I find is that a magic system that has limitations and costs and things that don't make it easy to just do whatever you want actually are more interesting. And forgery has a lot of those, which make it, for me, a very, very interesting magic system, that you have to actually do your research in order to have your forgery be really effective. And I think that's really cool.
Brandon Sanderson is great at making really intricate and detailed hard magic systems too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say it's his calling card. And but one of the things that's cool about this one is it's very thematic. And so when we talk about theme later, I'll get into that, but the idea of, I'm a historian, sorry, I shouldn't say I'm a historian. What makes you a historian? I don't make my living through history, but I did, for my degree, I did history. And I love the fact that by properly understanding the past, you can inform and transform people in the future. I love that concept, and it's very much at the core of this story, because the idea is not only can you forge objects, but you can reforge people if you can understand them well enough. And that is an amazing idea, because of the idea of being able to reforge yourself. And that is an interesting point.
Yeah, I love that aspect too, how you can, for it to be able to last, if you forge a new version of something, you forge a new version of something that lasts and you can only do that by fully understanding its past well enough. And I like too how it gets into how Shai is talking about how this table, it wants you to do these things as if objects themselves are conscious in a way, kind of like panpsychism, which I think is really interesting too.
And one of the interesting things too is how aware she is of the Cosmere, compared to other characters.
Yeah, when she's talking about the 3 different realms, right? That was really interesting.
Yeah. One of the things too, this system is also where Elantris is based, right?
Correct. We don't. They never make that point out loud, but at one point she goes she goes past a Gjorn and one of the red dress priests, and we know that they're based. We know they turn up and have a major role in the Elantris books, and also they mentioned a couple times that these aeons are written on things, like the Moon Scepter has this special script, and aeons are very much part of the Celish magic system. And we'll get into Cell and its magic system when we discuss the magic system.
Actually, that's what I was going to ask you guys about next, about Cell and its magic system. I forgot that this was the same one on which Elantris takes place.
Well, that's kind of why it's cool.
Because I know the shards are dead in the system, right?
Yeah,
that's interesting too. Just in terms of the Cosmere, some of my favorite aspects of these short stories in Arcanum Unbounded is Brandon Sanderson's little explanations of the planets and the differences between them, the differences between the magic systems, and how there's some planets that have dead shards, like you said.
Yeah, and remember, when we talk about a shard being dead, we mean the vessel's dead and the shard's power has been shattered. But you can't actually destroy energy. So one of the things that we understand from behind the scenes is realmatic theory. In other words, that throughout the Cosmere, there's the physical realm, the cognitive realm, basically where the concept or thought of what something is and how it perceives itself exists, and then the spiritual realm, which is where all things are one. And spirit must be, we never go to realm, but all power generates there, investiture.
Mm-hmm.
And the devotion, the shards that were invested on Cell have been destroyed by an enemy power called Odium. But when he destroyed them, the power needed to go somewhere. So he shoved it all in the cognitive realm. So the problem is that it's not on the physical realm anymore. However, it is accessible. And the way it's accessible is geographically locked because of the nature of it being in the cognitive realm at certain locations. So the magic for Elantris is locked in the area around Elantris. And so the further you get from Elantris, the less powerful Aeons become. And the magic of Thakandar, of the Gaiorn priests and their team is all over in their empire. And so Mepong, as I've pronounced that right, is where the Forger's magic is based. And the further you get from that, Shay's homeland, the weaker and weaker forging becomes. And that's because the power is literally located in that physical area in the cognitive realm. That is why. And so if we ever resolve this, and for example, those shards are reformed, we don't know how that might change Cellish magic in the future. But it's really cool that he gave us this insight, because you could just not know, and it doesn't matter to the story. Okay, you don't need to understand realmatic theory to enjoy this story. But if you do understand realmatic theory, you can get like a secret Easter eggs, which is cool, because anyone can pick up the Emperor's Soul and love it. But also, for those of us who absolutely love the Cosmere, this is a glimpse into an area that we never see anywhere else. And so we're like, give us more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's so great, being able to nerd out about all those details. And it's so interesting too that you can store things in is it the cognitive realm?
Realm.
Yeah, you can store things in the cognitive realm if you something like how you are uniting all three realms at once or something like that.
Absolutely. If you create what's called a perpendicularity. So if you see the realms as three horizontal lines, perpendicularities go perpendicular and link between them. And so if you have enough investiture to go between line A and line B, then you can connect the physical realm to the cognitive realm, and therefore either literally move something physical from one of those realms to the other, or take something like investiture from one realm to the other. But such things require investiture, for sure.
It's like the Elf Caller and what's the guy the Unite power? What's his?
Yeah. Bondsmith.
Bondsmith.
Bondsmiths can do it, but like Elf Callers can move between realms, and so can Lightweavers to an extent.
Right.
Because they have. Anyway, we're not. Hang on. Don't get me into Stormlight. Nice try, Dusty. Nice try.
Stormlight definitely has like the most Cosmere crossover out of anything else by Brandon Sanderson.
But that's because it's the magnum opus, right? It's the magnum opus. But all the rest is associated with it. So, can I say one of the things, like a little hint, is at the very beginning we find out that Shay was stealing the Moon Scepter. Okay, never comes up again in the story. But it's like the most like valuable artifacts in the place, and they caught her, and she's like cursing the fool, because apparently the Imperial Fool, or the Jester, worked with her, but he got away and she took the fall, and she thinks pretty much like she tells us he betrayed her.
You think it's Hoyd?
It's definitely Hoyd. There's utterly no doubt that it's Hoyd. So but one of the things that we find out through this is an interesting plot point that. And I mean, if you don't want to, I don't know what order you want to do this in, Andrew, but one of the interesting plot points here is that Shy sees herself as, she is a thief, but she doesn't see herself as one. She is a forger, but she doesn't really see herself as a forger. She sees herself as an artist. And I think that's an interesting thing about the Emperor's Soul is, are you what other people think you are, or are you what you say you are? Because somebody's like, well, of course it's what you say you are. But what if you're like a murderer who's like, yeah, I'm just a nice guy? I'm like, I don't care if you think you're a nice guy. You are a straight up killer, man. I don't think it's as simple as saying, when you say that you're a thing, that proves it. I don't. But what do you think? Is that the truth, or is that the greatest truth? Is what you see yourself as being because you know yourself best, or is it what other people perceive you to be because actually they're not as biased as you are, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's the third option. I think it's always kind of like a combination of both that kind of shifts depending on the situation and the person, because you can have an idea of yourself that's more accurate than other people's perception of you, but then, like you said, you also can have a flawed perception of yourself. And if everyone else thinks that you're a different way than the way that you present yourself to be, then maybe they're more right. Like maybe you could be such an arrogant person that you're an asshole who thinks that you're a nice guy, and everyone else is like, no, you're an asshole, dude. You're not a nice guy.
Yeah.
I think they
what you think, Dustin?
do. I think Shia does like a sufficient amount of background to not it being like a statement that you can just wave off, because I guess we got to think of what her motivations for doing the things she does. And we do see that there's a subplot about a stolen painting, and
Absolutely.
it literally for her has nothing to do about the money, but it was a request from her former art teacher, not wanting that painting to be in the possession of somebody, and he would rather have it destroyed. So her motivations don't seem primarily to be monetary, especially when it comes to the forging of the soul. I think that she asked for compensation as kind of a ruse, but really, her main focus for getting this thing done is because it's never been done, and it's kind of a challenge to her in that way. It's not really a monetary thing, but more of a challenge of somebody who really appreciates the craft of what they do. And she even criticizes, like, the palace has their own, so to speak, like assembly line type forgers. Yeah. They're not called forgers, but they're basically the same thing.
We're rememberers. But even that is Brandon Sanderson poking fun at like when we do that in our own world, right? When like people like condemn hacking and then employ hackers to defend against hackers, or when people like, if I take what's not mine, it's theft, but if you take it, it's taxes, or that kind of thing. So
yeah,
like,
or if I murder someone, it's murder, but if the government sends hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of people to a different country and sanctions it, then you can murder as many people as you want.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least it's the root of that argument, right? It's the root of that argument. That you can, one person does it and it's bad, another person does it and it's like noble or patriotic, but the thing that I love about the way Brandon Sanderson weaves the story is when we start with Shy, all we know is that she's a thief that got caught. We know she's meant to be really awesome at it, and that's it. We also know she's a forger. And then through the book, mainly through conversations that she has in her cell where she is because she got caught stealing, she talks to certain people, and then through that we begin to realize who Shy is. And like Dustin says, we get this background to her and we realize that she wants things to be beautiful. She wants things to be amazing. And like as they come into the cell, she is planning to escape from day one. By the way, I know that like she does it for the challenge, she does, but she also does it for survival. If at any point they thought she wasn't going to do it, like Fava would just have her killed. So like she's got to keep up the idea that she's doing it, even if she wasn't gonna. But she's a brilliant.
She makes her own tweaks too, right? Like her own tweaks, and there's the influences from other people who want it to be made in a certain way.
That's interesting too, how like even as she's making it, she puts into it stuff that's going to deliberately confuse anyone who is looking at her work, because she doesn't trust them to not kill her after she's done doing it and hand it off to one of those forgers who like are not really forgers because they can't do it well enough, like you mentioned, with how she doesn't trust them to not kill her.
Yeah, they're forgers, but they're just nowhere near as good as she is. Like, she is
Yeah.
a master. And one of the things that is so cool about Shai's character is that everything she does is a forgery. Even her own projected personality is not really who she truly is. And I love that. I think that's fascinating. But one of the cool things is she figures out all the different kinds of stone in her cell on day one. And by the way, I love the chapter countdown, how the chapters like by the day. So you feel it gets closer to 100. And it's like in like the 50th chapter, she's already got her plan to escape. Like in like she already thinks like, should I trigger my plan now and just try and get out? But she wants to stay for that challenge that Dusty mentioned. She's like, I've come so far in this masterpiece. I don't know if I want to know if it works. I want to know if it works. But what she does to the room is so cool because she's in this dreary cell. You know, it's dark. There's no light. It's not nice. And then as they come back day after day to speak with her, she's improving the room. Her bed becomes this nice bed. And then one day, like Gautona comes in and she's got a stained glass window. A stained glass window. He's like, how did you get it to like read its past so that it would be a stained glass window? And like she'd rewritten the whole room. So this room used to be a much more important room. And even though the room fell into misuse, the window was there. And you're thinking, what is all this telling me? And one of the things I love about this, and like when she does the table and it's this beautiful table, and he's like, you're fortunate. And she says the table wanted to be beautiful. One of the things I think about that is of people, right? But of all things, does something want to be used well? People who look or are taking actions that maybe be a bit, you know, the man who's struggling with an addiction, or the woman who has been completely allowed violence and hate to overtake her life. They didn't like probably plan on becoming that person. Yeah. Their life's experiences have led them there, but that isn't probably what they were hoping for. Okay. And yet it can be easy to judge them based on those actions. And so one of the things that she's done is she's not judged the cell, but what she said is, if some things were different, this place could be a better place. And so when they're coming in the room at the end, the cell is one of the nicest rooms in the palace. And it makes you think, well, what could you do with a person if you were able to just tweak some issues from their life? I remember being a primary school teacher and having some kids who came through my door, even at 8, 9, and 10, who were hard to like, who were difficult children. And often when you look into why they are that way at such a young age, you find it is almost entirely because of the impact they've had at home and their life experiences that have affected them. Kids are not born wanting to steal or to hurt people. It is a learned mechanic. And so it's interesting. And so one of the things that I think I love about the story is the idea. And the whole concept is, yeah, okay, you can forge a table, but can you forge a man? Can you forge a soul? And I think that's the whole concept of, if you can rewrite the past, if you can change things in someone's past, if you can help them have the experiences that will lead, they could actually become something that would really surprise you. What do you think of that point of forging? The idea that if you understand someone's past and you can change some of the way they feel about that past, that they can become a better man, or that during the moment now, you can forge yourself to become something different than where you're currently headed. What do you think about that as a point of this story, or as one of the points of this story?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Like, especially it brings up the question of what a soul is, and like that in itself is an interesting question too. And the way that it's explored in this is really interesting, because you have to know like what the person is really like, and you have to know a whole bunch of intricate details about their thoughts to create a new soul. And yeah, it's interesting too. Like you would want to be able to change people's memories to make them a better person in the future if you could. But then in terms of the magic system with this, that would mean that it wouldn't take, because it wouldn't be similar enough, so it wouldn't last as long. And then also, I mean, it doesn't seem like there are any consequences for, like, other than it not lasting for if you fix someone. So you can do it, but it would only be temporary. That makes me think too, because I was reading a book today about CRISPR, that gene editing technology, and how it brings up the moral questions of, whether you should edit a child's genes before they're born to prevent them from getting Down syndrome, and all the way to, would you want your child to be born with 10 times the normal muscle mass so they could grow up to be a champion weightlifter? And we don't know what the consequences could be for this down the line. Maybe you could do those things, but they end up getting cancer down the road. It'd be interesting to think about in terms of that too. Like, if you create a new soul for someone and you correct their flaws, is it going to end up, in terms of magic and like the fantasy realm, is it going to end up corrupting them in some way and making them evil down the line? Or it could work out that sort of way too.
And like, whenever anyone changes the past, right, there's in like any story, unforeseen consequences. It's like one of the things always. What do you think, Dusty, about this concept of reforging a soul, or even, like I say, of doing it in the common time, like forging yourself now to change your trajectory? What was your thoughts on this theme in the book?
I thought it was really interesting. Like, of course, it shows that the soul that she forges has to be extremely close for it to take. I think she also mentioned that with each imprinting, you won't have to focus on doing the stamp every day.
Yeah.
Because of repetitiveness.
But also because of the way he'll act, right? As he gains new memories, where he's behaving in the new way, actually it will be him again, because he'll have normal memories, so it won't be as necessary to keep reprinting, because he will have rewritten those lines himself. Like, if I pretend to be a nice guy for 20 years, when do I actually stop pretending and I am that guy? I've been doing it for so long. When does it become who I am?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things about this that makes me really think. Like, if I have really bad thoughts up here, but I deliberately try and do really nice things outwardly, and I never act on what's in here, am I an evil person pretending to be a good person, or am I actually a good person? And I'm not saying there's a quick cookie-cutter answer to that question. I'm not. But I'm saying I think that's worth considering, and for all of us. And I don't think I agree with you.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because you can look at that from different angles, because you can you could say, like, a sociopath or a psychopath, for example, could be pretending to be a totally different way from the way they are, and everyone could perceive them to be the different the way that they're presenting themselves rather than the way they actually are. And then also, like you were saying, if you're making choices and going against your wishes, at which point do you actually genuinely change your desires? And that brings up one question I've debated with a few people before about philosophy. Like, do your actions define your thoughts and your desires? And I always say that your actions do not tell you what you believe or think or desire exactly, because there are exceptions, like how everyone knows that it's healthier to exercise and not eat a bunch of junk food all the time, but yet a lot of people have trouble consistently eating healthily and exercising consistently, because it's hard to do. It's not like people want to be fat and out of shape. It's something that's hard to do. So people do things that we know are bad for us all the time too.
Yep. But as we persist, we can change. Sorry, Dusty, go.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, like, just thinking about what she did with the soul and its implications. To me, it just kind of seems like she refreshed it. Like, I don't believe she made any major changes. Like, she didn't really. The only thing she did was kind of refreshed it by removing some of the negative experiences that made the Emperor jaded.
From her point of view.
It's almost like she injected kind of a fountain of youth in the soul itself by, because we had his longtime friend comment on how this is how he used to be like 20 years ago. It's like the ideal version of this person before they got into politics and run down that way.
Because you're absolutely right, Dusty, and that's why it works, right? Because she doesn't rewrite him to be someone different. She rewrites him to be himself, but maybe just the self he wanted to have been. I always remember the line from the Lord of the Rings films when Gandalf comes back as Gandalf the White, and they're like, "Oh, we thought you were Saruman." He's like, "Well, I am Saruman, or rather Saruman as he should have been." And I think anyway,
it's like, and who he would have been if he hadn't been corrupted by Sauron, and then in the books too, in comparison to the movie, in comparison to the movies, because he has this sort of new position that's something different from Gandalf and the way Saruman should have been, and the way he did turn out. He comes back as Gandalf the Many-Colored, which is an interesting concept in itself too.
It is. And just like, it's a lot of thought. But one of the cool things about the story is they tell her, reforge this soul. And she's like, that would be so hard to do because it's not me. Normally you can only do an essence mark for yourself. But they know that she can do it because she's done it for herself. Shai has 5 essence marks. And these are basically soul stamps for her that will rewrite her past. And I thought one of the things that would be a cool thing to ask you guys is if you could have an essence mark of your whole life doing something different so that you could have the skills of having done all of that, even though you haven't actually done it, what would you have? Because she has 5 essence marks. She has Shai the Fist, which is her as if she'd spent her whole life training in different martial arts. She has Shai the Scholar, who instead of doing what she did in her life, spent her whole time studying and learning. And so she speaks like 17 languages and is a proficient scholar. She has Shai, the beggar, who's really streetwise, knows all the nooks and crannies of the city, and is like looks dirty and scummy and knows how to get by in the hardest of outwears. She has Shai, like the survivalist, who's like all the wood lore and trading. So if she had to live off wood bark for like a year, she could. And then she has the 5th mark, the one she'll never use. And on all of the others, even though she will have imprinted herself, she'll remember like that she's a forger as well. And this is a forgery. The 5th mark, she will forget that she's a forger. She will forget that entirely. She'll be afraid of travel. She'll go and live in a nice village, and she'll get letters from her uncle and aunt that she'll have sent to her by the delivery service. Yes, this is a part of the Cosmere that has a postal service. And she will, it's like literally her way, like when people talk about in a heist movie, I just get that last big score and then I'm going to retire. Or you're Thanos and you're going to go to a planet farm. That's her.
I'm just going to destroy half the universe and then go and have a vacation.
Yeah.
Well, that Thanos thing, though,
is a really cool idea.
Yeah.
The Thanos going on a farm is actually canon to the comic books, just to let you know.
Oh,
he
is
actually
it?
does that, yeah.
Is Thor getting fat canon to the comic books?
No. That's a Marvel Cinematic Universe thing.
I think that was actually pretty interesting.
It was hilarious, at least. But
yeah.
So what do you think, guys? If you could, without actually going back and doing it, what are some things that you would love to be able to just go, boom, I'll have that skill for a couple of days, as if I'd spent my life doing it? What would you have?
Man, like I have trouble thinking of new ones other than you mentioned, but I think I would want to go for two of the ones that Shai has too. I would want to go for the martial arts one and the scholar one, because I like working out and stuff, and I keep telling myself that I'm gonna get into learning martial arts, but I never get around to it. And I've like tried to get a university degree a few times, but then I always end up not having enough money and then losing interest because I hate all these little things like having to do citations on paper, even though I love learning. So that sort of thing. I'm not sure
absolutely.
like what else I would want to do. I'm sure there are all sorts of other skills that I would want to learn if I could just download them like Matrix style, basically, which is kind of a similar type of thing. I'm not sure what I would want to do. There are so many of them, though. It's hard to think of anyone in particular.
But the thing is, Andrew, I just think you just did, right? Because one of the things that's really interesting about what you just said there really goes to the magic of forging. It's your life, right? A kind of life that Andrew would lead. It's absolutely believable that in one of your versions that, you know, instead of working out or as part of your working out, you got into martial arts, you loved it and dedicated your life to it. That is a completely believable version of the Andrew life because of how much you love the physical body and working it and how much enjoyment that gives you. And same with the scholar, because you love books, you love learning, you love ideas. It's totally possible that another Andrew, maybe at a much younger age, found that academia worked for him and dedicated himself to it and did it all for academia and has 17 degrees and is still writing books and reading books. I like that. And is maybe a very focused version of Andrew, maybe. But it's still very believable because it's very much in who you are. That's the difference between forging and the Matrix. The Matrix just goes, give me the ability to ride a helicopter, download, go. Forging is about rewriting your history, but still maintaining truth to the core of who you are, or the soul, even though that's a complicated thing. Go on, Dusty. What would you do? What would be some of Dusty's essence marks?
One of them would probably be like studying music from an early age and being able to play like tons of different instruments and being able to compose tunes and all of that. I'd love to have that essence mark. Another would be like, how do I explain it? Just imagine somebody who has like engineering prowess that can fabricate things. Like think of, you know, the Mythbusters. Like they'll just go into a garage and make these crazy contraptions to try to bust a myth. Something like
Centrist
that.
MacGyver?
Just have the ability to, hey, something's broken. Let me go in my garage and
I can fix it.
power up the welder. That's kind of how I am anyway. Like I'll try to fix something. Like I have like a bunch of friggin' tools in the garage.
But imagine if
like I have a welding machine, but I'm not very good at it because it takes lots of practice.
If you'd had a life of going to mentors and working in that and having people who gave and bounced ideas off you and then you'd made things and they'd worked and that had given you money so you'd been able to concentrate solely on developing that craft, just think about what an engineer you could be at this age. And like that's the cool thing is, again, this is who you are anyway. You do love your music. You are creative and you do love your, you know, making things, repair, inventive thinking outside the box. That's the point of forging. That's the point of it. It's so great that that's where we've naturally, and such a different question from saying, if you could have a superpower, what would you want? I think forging's far more interesting because it draws on that core identity of what we have. And I think, like in my life, I've picked up and started about, I think 6 different instruments that I properly started learning, and I finished none. Like to a decent, to any.
I don't think you ever finish any. I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Do you mean like become proficient?
Yeah, I didn't become proficient enough that I can pick any of those up now of the 6 I started, like violin, recorder, guitar, drums. They're the ones that spring to mind. And I started all of them out. I was having lessons with piano. I was having lessons with all of those, like with an actual teacher, and not a single one of them could I sit down and play today, not even at a reasonable level. And so, and some of me really regrets that, like deeply, because I love singing, I love music, but I am not good at it. And the main reason is I just don't care enough to try hard and practice every day. And that's the toll. If you want to go down that music route, the toll is practice.
Yeah,
I would
you
also,
lose it, definitely.
yeah, I would
Yeah.
also love a version of me that is a public speaker, like that,
That's
like just
interesting.
lives and does that, just talks and maybe. I mean, I don't think I could ever be a politician, but I'd love to see a world in which I was one. I don't think I would want to
Like-
be one, but I'd love to see a world in which I was one already, because I I have had the opportunity to speak sometimes to hundreds of people at once, and
Mhm.
I've seen the impact my words can have when they're guided by the right intent. And I just wonder. There's a part of me that wishes that I was brave enough to just risk it and try and become that. But I mean, I need to like survive cancer or something to have a hook, because I'm just like, you need something, right, to make you interesting enough to then be able to do that. But I would love to do that. So I would love like a past in which I went through some dramatic experiences that gave me the opportunity to go and share ideas and stories with people, because I would freaking love that.
You
I
would
would
think you would need
adore
something
it.
interesting, but
Mm.
you don't, I would say,
You need
because
something to get started because no one will pay you. You need to have something to get you started.
That's why
oh
a
Otherwise,
lot
you're
of
yeah,
losing.
you gotta
that's why a
craft.
lot of people who become politicians end up coming from rich
Yeah,
families, and then their parents just go, oh yeah, you try to be a politician, doesn't matter, you take 10 years, doesn't matter, we'll pay for it the whole way.
Well,
yeah.
I
And
think public
yeah, that's true.
speaking is very similar to like what a comedian does. So they
Yeah.
have an act, and when you
Yeah.
do public speaking, you also have an act. Because I'm just
Yeah.
thinking of some of my favorite like podcasters and things. Like
Yep.
just thinking of Hunter Motts, he has like these same anecdotes that he always tells,
Yeah.
but he
Mhm.
always tells them so well on these different podcasts. So it's
Pulls you
almost
in.
like you just have to have these really core stories and anecdotes about yourself that you could tell people. And it's something that, like everything else, it takes practice and you got to
Correct.
work on it.
Mhm.
Agreed. And so
I could see you doing that, Tristram,
yeah,
because
I would love to do
like
that.
because you're a great guy. I can see you really inspiring people if you put work into it and that.
And and the thing is, Andrew, in our own lives, like you said already, we've all got a hint of this, right? Already. It's
Mhm.
true to our character. Like in a very minor way, like because of my work with my church and stuff, I have had that experience of sitting in front of 300 people and saying something and then having people go, my goodness, I want to do what you said. That changed my life. I felt this, whatever. And so you get a hint of, I can do this. There's something there. But like
Mhm.
Dusty said, you got to dedicate yourself to something if you want true expertise. And I'm a bit like you guys with books. I'm eclectic in my life. I have like 30 hobbies, none of which I'm good at, but all of which I love. And so I think the only thing I've succeeded at in life is being ridiculously happy. I am very, very happy.
That's a good thing to succeed at.
It is, but I'm not like
Yeah.
actually excellent at anything. And so one of the
Yeah,
things I
you
would
get
choose,
lucky. Like some people get very lucky after able to professionalize one of their hobbies.
some
That's
of it's
kind of
luck.
like
I'm trying to do that by nerding out about books with my friends.
Yeah, but unfortunately,
well,
it's hard
I've
to
done
get
it.
paid.
Like I professionalized one of my hobbies.
Yeah,
Probably
designing
for
video
like
games.
5 years.
That is
But
Right?
cool.
man, is that hard to on the soul. It's
But
very
that,
difficult on the soul.
but you know what I said, Centrist Forger, is what you just said is like, it isn't really luck, is it? You put in some serious graft, and that's why it worked. And like when you look at Brandon Sanderson, for example, he's my idol. If I was going to pray false god, it'd be that man. But he is a legend. And when you look at his success, isn't luck. I mean, there is a little bit of luck in that someone picked up his book one day and decided to publish it. If you look at what's got him there, there's hundreds and thousands of hours underneath that luck, so that when the luck came along, it counted. I need a lot more of the luck to be a pianist. You need a lot of work underneath it. Anyway, going back to the book, this is the point of forging. Yes, it's got this magic side to it, but there's all this deep research first. And so she talks to people about Ashravin, the emperor. She can't talk to him. He's basically brain dead and in a coma. And interestingly, they've had someone already reforge his body, so his body works. But apparently they can't reforge the brain, which suggests that the brain is involved with the soul, or that thought processes are really what we are. That's another thought for another time. But she talks to all these people, and they all have views. But the person she gets most of it from is a person called Gautona. And Gautona was his mentor back in the day. And she's forging Ashravin's soul, and she has his diaries. And so she's writing about him, and she gets it, a lot of him right. But she finds that a lot of them don't take. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is one of the key moments is where she tries to figure out why he wanted to be emperor. And the actual answer is because Gautona wanted him to be. Because his mentor believed he would be a great emperor and pushed him to be, that is actually the key thing that made him want to be emperor. And that is really interesting because he goes from not wanting to be emperor to, by the way, we know in this period of time that we're in now that Gautona is out of favor with Ashravin, because even though he helped him when he was young, they clash, and he's the one who tells him no when no one else will. And so it's like, what changed? And one of the things that she realizes is one of the things that she has to get right near the end is that Gautona made him feel ashamed, because originally he'd had all these high ideals and he falls short of them. And his old mentor's disappointment is a reminder that he never became who he really wanted to be, because he was corrupted by the politics of the time. And that's why the soul stamp takes, because she gives him not this new, better version that she decides. She gives him who he originally wanted to be. And that's, I think, the core to helping someone change in the real world. If you're trying to help someone overcome an addiction or make a change to their personality, I don't think it's much good to tell them that they're rubbish and they need to be the way you say they should be. You need to find out who they want themselves to be and then help them become the person they themselves are already wishing they could become. And if you support that journey instead of implying one of your own, I think you have a chance of the change taking. And I think that's one of the messages of this book. Certainly it's one of the ones that I got out of it when I was reading it. And I've been in a situation where I've been invited to help people who are struggling, sometimes with mental health choices, sometimes with other bad choices that they've made. And when I say bad, I don't mean bad in my opinion. I mean bad in their opinion. And so when someone wants to change something like that, like if you talk to counselors, for example, or addiction recovery specialists, they'll say that nothing works unless the person themselves wants the change. And I think that's the reason that this story is so cool, because even though he's comatose, she realizes that she can do something that he himself would want if he was awake to want it. Anyway, what do you think of that idea of like that she actually helps himself realize his better choices, who he wished he was going to be in the past?
That's interesting that she does that, even though she's been forced to make this new soul for him. Like she could have easily just I don't know, made it worse in some ways, or worse in some sort of secretive ways. I had never really thought about that before.
Well, there's also the thing where she did not
Put in the back
use
door.
any type of influence for self-preservation. When she finally talks to the emperor, when she stamps him, and she realized, oh, I didn't put anything that would make my life particularly safe at this moment. But she really, really wanted to see what the fruits of her labor was going to be before she skedaddled out of there. So, yeah, I think she really wanted to see if she did a good job or not.
That's a good point. Yeah, that kind of gets back to how she sees her work as a forger, as being an artist, like the art of forging him a new soul, and she wants to see the end result. That makes sense.
It does. Andrew, you took the words out my mouth, man. I am one with you here. Our minds are finally linked. That is exactly what I was thinking. Best argument for her truly being an artist and not just a forger. Like, if you see like one of those things like the Manchurian Candidate where someone reprograms someone's mind, they always put in like a trigger word to make sure, if you've seen Black Widow, I'll put in something. If I'm programming you, I'll put in something that keeps me safe or helps me out. And she doesn't, because in the end, her biggest trick is she ends up manipulating Tona, who is really clever, and he's determined to not be manipulated. And he's like, you've manipulated me. Why did you trick me into this? And she's like, I did it the only way I could. I was genuine. She's like, the only way I can trick you was by telling the absolute truth. And he's like, dang it, that worked on me. That actually worked on me. You being completely open and telling me your escape plan has actually got me to help you escape.
Yeah.
Because at the end, her escape plan works and she could leave. She could get out and she doesn't have to do it. But like Dusty says, she goes and she imprints the Emperor, and everyone who knows she's escaped go running out looking for her, and Gautona goes straight to the Emperor's room, because unlike the others, he is not interested in keeping the Emperor alive for his own power. He is the one who wants the Emperor alive because he loves him, because he loves that man, and he just wants him to live. Even if the Emperor disagrees with him, even if he hates him now, even if he's disappointed with Gautona these days, even if he removes him from his position of power, he wants him back because he loves him as a person. And so when everyone else rushes out to see where she's gone, he runs to the Emperor, the man he sees as a son, to make sure he's okay. And of course, he sees Shai there, and Shai imprints the Emperor. And then Gautona keeps their end of the deal, which is implied that the others were not going to do, especially considering they were trying to get other forgers to finish her work. And the only reason they didn't is because she made it so complicated that they're like, we have no chance. She says that the book she wrote was like a forgery in itself. It was a forgery that said, stay away from this work. This is impossible. This is incredibly complicated. And so she like literally drew a painting within a painting within a painting whilst also planning her escape. A little genius. I love her. And I love the fact that Gautona, through the process of being stamped with Arsraven's marks to test them, becomes to really understand him better than ever. And that's when he realizes that Shai gets it. And at one point, he understands something that even though he'd known him all this time, that he himself had not understood, which is why Shai doesn't figure it out till much later, which is that Arsraven's hate of his disappointment and how ashamed he was that he disappointed Gautona. Gautona hadn't realized that, and hadn't realized that was what was driving the wedge between them. And I think there's so much there for a parent to pay attention to, that if your child feels that you're disappointed in them, that might end up driving a wedge that you do not intend to drive. You might be disappointed because you hope the best for them. But if you allow that to show, and if you allow that to be a continual thing, you might end up driving them away from you, even though, like Gautona, you're the one who has their best interests at heart, and you're the person who's going to remind them of their best selves. There's a lesson there from Brandon Sanderson to anyone who'd be a mentor or a teacher. And I think that's fantastic. And Gautona, when he realizes it, he cries. He cries. Because he recognizes maybe you aren't just a forger. Maybe you truly are someone who understands. And when he says to her, like, how do you do it? She just says, I understand people. I understand people.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's kind of like she understands the Emperor even more than he does, to the point that she knows the mistakes that he made in interacting with him and in trying to raise him up and to get him to accomplish what he wants to accomplish rather than what the emperor himself wants to accomplish. And yeah, what you said there about like the painting within a painting gets back to that whole like intricate setup plot, like a game of chess, some sort of heist movie. And it's interesting too how she, like, we see that she Gautona having that relationship with the emperor, him caring about him so much and knowing the emperor so much is what allows him to be the only person who knows where Shai is going to go, kind of coincidentally too. So that's all very interesting as well. And then it made me think about exactly, when she's thinking, having that thought earlier in the book that she's saying, I have to be genuine in here. That's all very interesting too. And then there's that reminded me too of that how there's that point where she earlier on she tries to escape and she fails, and then every morning she ends up being able to escape because after that, every morning they have this sort of blood seal thing where at the start of every day they put it on her door. That whole part of it is really interesting too.
Yeah, weed fingers. So one of the things that's interesting here is there's a subplot about cultural enmity, because the empire is huge and it's conquered countries. So the strikers, who were like her guards, are from a different part of the empire, and they're seen as a bit stupid. They're not given the right education. And Brandon Sanderson took this from Korea, where the common man was not allowed to learn to read or write for a while. And so basically they kept them down, as it were. There was the elite class, and they stayed elite because they were the only ones allowed to be educated. And we see that in medieval Europe as well, with things like the priests being the only ones who could speak Latin. And so therefore you were dependent upon them to understand the Bible. And so if you believed in it, you therefore were completely at the mercy of those who could read and write. Anyway, beside the point. But the thing is, there's a diversity. She's a foreigner. The strikers are foreigners. And so there's this enmity between them. And when the blood sealer comes in, he takes a bit of her body. And one of the things that blood sealers can do is they can use your blood. And it's also forgery, what they do, but it's a specific kind, using parts of human remains. And it also allows them to animate skeletons. So you can understand,
that's
right?
Really cool.
This magic has become seen as a bit dark and evil. Not surprising when you're using people's blood. It's a bit voodoo. And but one of the things that's really cool is, how does she beat it? She doesn't beat it by defeating blood magic. No. She gets to know the blood sealer. She figures him out. She figures out he has a girlfriend who's writing her for him from back home, and that when that girlfriend doesn't write, he goes out drinking. So she realizes he deals with bad days by drinking too much, and then he comes in late. And she knows that the magic's got a time limit. So then one day she drops a letter that the guards, who aren't very bright, think comes from the blood sealer. She plays on their superstitions, so they go and beat the crap out of him because they think he's taking some of their hair. And really, if they just asked him, and he'd be like, no, who'd you believe? You're the crazy forger thief girl. But they fall for it because of their prejudice. Because of their prejudice, which leads them to believe he would be that way. And their fear and superstition, which again is Brandon just dropping messages in here. And then
he's
it's
so
all
good at
carefully
that.
timed. And then it goes off and she can escape. But that isn't all she's done. And I love this moment as well. The striker runs it. One of these strikers told her he was going to kill her, by the way, in the first chapter. So like we knew he was bad news. And he runs in to get her. And do you remember how he's defeated?
Bad.
No.
Sorry? What'd you say, Dustin?
She forges like the bed so that it's like weak. And
absolutely. All this time, she's been improving the room, right? All this time, she's been making the room perfect. It's beautiful. It's better than most rooms in the palace. But then she forges a flaw, a deliberate flaw, that the bed was rubbish and it's got all these breaks in it and it's just about to plunge into a pit. and she leaves these flaws in place. And I love that because she uses a trap, and that's cool as a gimmick. And it shows how she gets away, and then she can get to the Emperor, and then because of the deal, Gautona gives her the essence marks. But the cool thing about that is this. What if some of the flaws in our own personalities are necessary for our escape to happiness and our success? And I think that's one of the cool things is that while she wanted the room to be its best self, one of the things she needed it to be was not just pretty and beautiful and well made. She needed it to have a flaw, because that flaw is what ends up saving her life. And I think that's a cool message, that it isn't just about looking pretty and being the strongest and the cleverest, that sometimes it's actually our flaws that are the things that will save us in the end. And that's what makes the room unique. And I think that's a cool little extra message just slotted in to the transformation of the cell.
Yeah. You know, that specifically actually is bared out even even more directly in Brandon Sanderson's Alcatraz series, right?
Absolutely.
Where your magic powers are based are manifested as flaws. Like, I break things. Oh, okay. Well, let's try to figure out a good way for you to break things.
I constantly get lost. That can't be helpful, can it? Actually, yes, it can. I'm always late. That's not a superpower. Oh, but it is. Yeah.
I'm going to call that a superpower now because I'm always late too.
I think you sleep as a superpower, buddy. You can sleep anywhere, anytime.
Yeah. I can sleep at any hours.
So, so I love that flaw thing. And then, of course, the fact that she goes and does follow through on what she said she was going to do and stamps the Emperor means that Gautona could catch her. But instead of catching her, he's actually like, no, the thing I'm really bothered about is not if you escape. The thing I'm really bothered about is if you stamp the Emperor. You've kept your side and I'll keep mine. And she knows that Gautona will stick to his word. She knows he will. She knows who he is. And so by her doing her side, she knows he will do his. And so being genuine with him, giving away the plot, actually saves her. And I love that. And then he gives her 5 essence marks, with which she goes from being a clever woman to being a superpowered individual, because she can then give herself these abilities. And so eventually the Blood Sealer and the Striker catch up with her, but they are not ready for Shy the Fist. And she's
gotten her martial arts powers now, basically. That part's really cool too.
Because she hasn't been this person. So the thing that's cool, one of the things is that Zoo has treated her like a bully, right? I'm going to kill you. I'm bigger than you. I'm stronger than you. It doesn't matter that you're clever. It doesn't matter that you're valuable. I can do whatever I want to you because I'm big and tough, and I can force my will on you. I don't have to listen to you. And there's a lot of people who say that in the world, one way or another. They might be doing it with money. They might be doing it with muscle. They might be doing it with misused authority or power. But there are people who act in the ways Zoo does. And one of the things that's cool is that she then can reverse that on him, because actually she can now show him what's like when you come up against someone who is stronger than you. And that's what all bullies eventually will face. People who bully with money will eventually come across someone who has more. Someone who bullies with power will eventually come across someone who has more. And that's why people who rely on anything, looks, money, power, or physicality to enforce their will are destined to be disappointed when it comes for them. And I think that's one thing that Brandon shows here.
Your strength can be a weak spot. It can be your weakest spot. And that reminds me earlier about what you said about bullies and how like most people don't choose to be bullies. That makes me think of that too, because most bullies are kids who are like, they have a shitty life at home. Their parents don't give a shit about them, or maybe they're abusive, and then they go to school and then take it out on other people because they're being tormented similarly at home.
Yeah. Or even just start to think that the wrong thing is the role model. There was a boy I knew who I didn't understand well at all. And then I met his father, and his father treated his mother extremely poorly. So he wasn't battering this kid at home or anything like that, but he was treating the child's mother in a really poor way. but the child idolized his father. So he thought those behaviors are the behaviors to have. And one of the reasons I was his teacher is because of the way he treated female staff members. He had a really terrible attitude for a 10-year-old to all females. And it was hard to deal with, to see that in a 10-year-old. You're like, wow, why do you speak like this and act like this? And then you meet the father and you say, he wants to grow up to be you. He thinks that what you do is what is manly. He thinks what you do is what shows affection. And so he's got a skewed view of the world.
Yeah. Like his father is his model. He thinks this is how I should be towards women, because when I'm a dick to them, that's how I show them that I care about them. That's how it really works in reality.
Yeah. And that's how you get what you want from women, because that my dad gets what he wants and he's awesome. And so it just shows, again, the abuse can be in more than one way is what I'm saying. And you can warp someone's opportunities. And so you wonder, same person grows up in a different household. How does he turn out? He's still him. And is the soul something we're born with? Is there something in us that is just unique? Or are we simply the sum of our genetics plus our experiences? And that's up for debate, and probably not going to get solved today.
That's why it's so that's one of the things that's so great about fantasy. It can explore these, fantasy and science fiction, because we were talking before we started this too about those Isaac Asimov stories, The Last Question and The Last Answer, which also have some like theological themes. AI becomes God, creates afterlife, and then in this of course there's the nature of the soul and what is a soul, and it gets into kind of specifically how you literally can construct a new soul for someone in this, it was so fascinating.
One of the last things I definitely want to touch on though as well is like there's the whole heist thing and the escape, but one of the things I want to talk about is what Dusty mentioned, that she steals the painting and destroys it because it was done by her old master, and he did it for the love of his life. It wasn't really meant to outlast her, it was for her. And he also didn't approve of the Rose Empire, and yet it's being held up as a symbol of their power. And so he's like, I'm blind, I'm helpless to get rid of this, will you do it for me? And so she does it more as a favor to him than to make any money or gain any fame, which is amazing. And Gautona gets that, but he is disturbed and saddened deeply that she destroyed the painting, because he believes that works of art should be preserved. He kind of understands when she explains and forgives her a little, but he still finds the destruction of any art awful, which is why when at the end he destroys her book, it's a powerful moment, because he does it because he feels he has to, but he does call her Book of Forging the Soul of Ashravan a work of art. And to show that he would do that is so powerful. And he does it to make sure that the emperor remains free, which again demonstrates his love. But I have a question for you. She can forge so well that she can do versions of the masterworks of this painter so well that they are indistinguishable from the original. And Gautona says to her, why be a forger? Go be an epic painter, right? Because you can legally do that, and you are amazing at it. And it's implied that she replaced the scepter and made a forgery of that too, that was so good it's sitting in the gallery right now because the fools got away with the real one. And they caught her attempting to put a fake in place of the real lily in the garden. But we find out that they're both fakes. She did them both. She just did one without a flaw and one with a deliberate flaw, so they would see it was a fake and assume that was one she was swapping, because she'd also taken the third painting and destroyed it, which is super clever. So they think they foiled her theft. They actually didn't foil her theft, either of the two thefts, which is one of the secrets of the story. She's that good. If she hadn't been betrayed by the fool, she'd have got out for sure. But here's my question for you. Should she quit being a forger and be an artist? Like,
oh man,
why be a forger when you could be a legitimate artist? Or
I personally, like, if it were me, I'd prefer being an artist, but I mean, I don't know. Since this is a story, it's so much more interesting for her to be a forger. But I can see that, like, that makes her character so much more interesting too, because maybe she also would be happier if she were an artist instead of a forger. I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting.
Well, there's multiple impacts, aren't there? Because the escape route that she has is that. That's the escape route. And if she has the escape route, she could marry, she could have family, she could have friends that she could actually trust. She would also not need to be illegal, so she wouldn't need to hide from anyone. She could settle down, she could be comfortable, she could be rich. But anyway, what do you think, Dusty?
I think there's definitely some perks to having access to the power that she has.
Oh, for sure.
I'm assuming that there's more than just, like, I understand that she's an artist and things, but when you do something naughty, there's definitely some type of rush you get for doing that. And I'm kind of assuming, like, that she values those things, like, just like the forging of that soul. That's not something an artist would have access to at all. But she has this incredible talent, a unique talent. And hey, what's forging of a soul? And then you can probably paint a painting. I think she's just trying to use her unique talents to the fullest, which is why she probably prefers the certain path that she chose.
Yeah, she's
and maybe part of her just likes the life of being a criminal and all those aspects that you mentioned too.
Yeah,
because there's definitely like a rush to it. You know, it's nice to live. I want to say maybe she just likes living an unorthodox lifestyle, and she gains some satisfaction from that.
Yeah. And from being the very best there is at it. And it does open so many doors. I know some people who could do so much, but they just can't stay fixed on one thing. They get bored too easily. They want to. Well, no, that's the wrong word, because they can focus really, really well. But they do one thing, and then they're like, right, I'm done with that now. I'm gonna have a new career, and they go off and do a new full career. And I'm like, that sounds exhausting. but they're like really good at it. And it made me think, I wonder what would have happened if they just dedicated everything to the first career. Like, I wonder how many people could have become, I don't know, the fastest man in the world at the 100 meters, but instead they did martial arts and archery and running and swimming and rock climbing, and got good, like, to within the top 100 in 17 different things. Because they didn't want to just commit to one. And I don't think either of those is the wrong choice. I think they are different choices. And you can choose how you forge your soul.
Those are like, both of those options are equally impressive to me, but like maybe one option would get more attention than the other. Like, if people devoted their lives to one single thing, maybe they would get more attention, and they would, I don't know, win a Nobel Prize, or win in the Olympics or anything like that.
That's a really good point, Andrew. I always really upset me when I see
connected. No, I was just going to say, a lot of the people that tend to switch around, I'm kind of that way. I'm
definitely that way. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm always switching my hobbies around. Like, one year I'm like, oh, I'm going to weld a car from scratch or something like that. And then one year I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn how to use video software and create all this crazy stuff. But I think it's mostly around the novelty of things can be exciting. And once you pass that novelty and it becomes routine, that's when it's not as fulfilling. I think that's usually what happens with those types of people. It's just the novelty outweighs the mastery of something, when the mastery itself becomes like very routine in some respect.
Absolutely. And one of the things I would say as well, Dusty, is the trajectory, the curve, the learning curve is sharpest at the beginning, right? Like if you learn languages, becoming fluent in the language, as in so you can just openly have a conversation on pretty much any random topic without preparation, getting that level of language in 15 languages is difficult, right? But amazing. And it allows you to do so much, and it's incredibly impressive. To become an absolute expert in English will only add this much actual vocabulary to you, and will require intense training in grammatical rules to get to the best of the best of the best of the best in English, to very little benefit in your everyday life, or so it would seem. And it's I noticed that with running. Like I don't get me wrong, I'm not a real runner, but when I started going out running, my speed went like this as I ran my 5K, quicker. And I was at one point I was dropping like entire minutes off my time, yeah. But then after I'd been doing it for about 3 months, my differences started to go up in seconds,
Right.
yeah. And then it became really difficult, and sometimes I couldn't even beat what I'd done the day before. And sometimes I would really push myself and go all out and eat properly the day before and get my jogging buddy to come with me. And we would do timed points at different points in the course so we could check our speed, so we knew if we were ahead or behind, and have bleeps on our watches, and really tried. And on our level tried, not on like, Michael Johnson level tried. But and we would run, and we were struggling, and blood, sweat, and tears, and we were maybe improving by 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And I'm like, this doesn't feel fulfilling anymore.
Yeah, plateauing is not fun.
Yeah. And you plateau in everything, right? Like everyone gets noob gains on any new exercise or sport or form of exercise or the form of physical activity that you're doing, or anything that you're learning. Like you said, the learning curve is steepest at the top, and then that's why you need to try to figure out ways to like shake up your training routine, or like shake up the way that you're learning something and do it in a different way to shock your body or your mind into getting out of that plateau or something like that, which is why it can be so easier to get distracted by other things and go like, well, I'm going to quit running now and I'm going to go lift, and I'm going to go just completely give up on running and lift weights instead so I can chase the noob gains again. Or if you're learning something, well, I'm going to bail on learning guitar and I'm going to go learn drums now instead because I can learn faster at that.
Yeah. And it's just exciting and interesting. And the thing is, I've discovered that for myself, I do not necessarily love, I mean, I maybe I would if it ever happened, but I don't miss not being number one. Like in my current understanding of my life, I've never been an A student. I don't think I've had an A in my life. By the way, A's in England are not A's in America either. Because like if I was in some American school, certainly in elementary school, I would have got some A's because I turned up and handed in all my papers and got all the right answers. But you need to, in GCSEs and so on, you need to do something to properly excel. 95 percentile to get an A. Oh,
okay.
Yeah, like you can't just be a good student. Yeah, but I'm like a mid-grade student, right? I'm a C guy. I do my job, I get the work done, but it's not great. It's just okay. And it has yet to really disappoint me in my life. And what I've found is I'm pretty good at a lot of things, but I would never be someone like Shy. The reason Shy excels is because she is absolutely insanely dedicated to her forger status. And we need people like her so there can be people like me. It always saddens me when I see, like in the Olympics, someone get a silver medal. And there was someone in my country who got a silver medal and wouldn't even put it around his neck. He was so upset that it wasn't gold.
Oh, wow.
And I just think that disrespects, to me, that disrespects the journey. Like, oh my goodness, I'm only the second best in the entire freaking world. Dude.
Yeah.
But there's some people who have the idea that if you're not first, you're just a loser, which I just find baffling as a concept. I'm like, the fact that you're better than the another like several billion people at this doesn't make you feel even a little good. I'm like, there's something
Yeah.
wrong with what you're doing. Like if
Yeah,
I'm
well,
if I win,
like if you're
yeah.
going to it depends on what you're going for too, because well, I don't know, like maybe this is partially my bias as well, but I mean I prefer for myself just focusing on my own self improvement instead of
Yeah.
comparing myself to others, because well, the like that's just a recipe for depression. It's like
Yes.
I'm never gonna like deadlift 1,000 pounds, or I don't know, be like the most jacked ripped guy in the entire world ever,
Nope.
or anything like that. But I can continue to work out and get into better shape for the rest of my life. And in the same way, like if I get if like I don't even want to be one of those people who has like millions and millions of subscribers to my YouTube channel, and then like everyone cares about everything I say on social media, and I make like hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars a year from my YouTube channel. I would suffice for like the best. My top goal is being able to kind of squeak out a living where I don't have to do other things for money. That would be pretty awesome. I wouldn't even want to be like, I'm not sure I would even want to be the best at the world at anything, even if it's like writing a book, which is still a huge artistic interest of mine. Like if I were the number one author in the entire world, I think that would just be too much fucking attention, man. Like,
yeah,
I
it's
I
just
think
a cool
like,
thought, though, right?
yeah, for sure.
It's an interesting thought, and like you say, comparison to oneself is far more sensible. And when you think again about forging, that is what forging does. It doesn't make you into someone else. It tries to make, or it potentially can make you into a better version of yourself. And like, yeah, I agree with you entirely. But I also know that some of the people who've done extremely well say the reason they've done extremely well is because of that attitude. Because they believe that nothing will do except victory, that is why they are the kind of people who get those victories. And because second place was never satisfactory, that's why me and you are unlikely to ever be standing on the top of a podium with 700 people beneath our feet.
Yeah. Well,
because we just don't care.
I've had to deliberately change my mindset in that way too, because I used to be a tremendous workaholic, and like that especially doesn't mesh well with the fact that I have OCD. So those in combination with each other just ramped up my depression that I also have all the time. So I had to like literally teach myself to relax and not be so fucking obsessive about doing everything perfectly as best as quickly as I can all the time, and do everything I want to do every day on my to-do list, no matter what the cost, and like reject my friends who want to hang out because I haven't done enough today or something like that.
So you reforged yourself.
Yeah, I made a new soul.
You took what you. Yeah, it's still you, but it's a new version where you can be a bit more at peace with some of the things that were causing you hassle. What were you saying, Dusty? Sorry, man. I know you were trying to talk.
No, it's just like I'm exactly on board with what Andrew's saying. I know one of my things that I always say is that I'd never want to be a CEO of a company.
Yeah.
That just seems way too stressful. With like the way I want to live my life, it just seems that the rewards don't match with the risks for me.
Yeah.
Like, they get all this money, but it almost seems like their life is completely ruled by the title of their job.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, usually those people, I'm not sure what kind of family lives that they have. I'm assuming a lot of it is pretty distant.
One. But it can be. It's got to be tricky because the higher you go, the more people expect you to prioritize, like the work. They say, "Look, paying you this much, you have to give everything." And like, well, do I though? What do you think about the relationship between Gautona and Shai? Because most of the book consists of that relationship. So what do you think of the way that is written and affects the book? What do you think?
Well, I think
I
what you
know
were talking
she's
about
like,
here.
but
Go ahead.
she's kind of like what they would consider. She's basically practicing in what's considered taboo to their culture.
Mhm.
And then Galtona kind of slowly learns about what she actually does. And he becomes to appreciate her talents in the end, as far as being, oh no, I have these cultural hangups about what she does. But man, what she does is basically art with another name
Mhm.
on it.
What were you saying,
Yeah.
Andrew?
Yeah, I was saying kind of similarly to what Dusty just said there. A lot of what you were saying about the nature of relationship kind of added to my understanding of it, and it's really interesting and complex. Like this sort of thing that is a relatively common trope, but of course Brandon Sanderson executes it really well, which is like you're sort of almost frenemies in a way.
Yeah.
You are your enemies, but you kind of like respect each other, and it's an interesting relationship in that way.
It is. It's interesting because he's so powerful, and he's technically the jailer, and so if you read things like Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, anything set in a prison, it's always interesting to see how they manage to make the person in prison develop in that experience, and how can you develop when you are limited to a room, and can you interact with the other people there and learn and
Mm-hmm.
grow, or is your life on hold? Because I remember as a child, I used to think that prison was just like you're just stuck there and then nothing happens and you get out. And I've realized that's not the case, that many people use prison as an opportunity to actually do a lot of reading or learning or change. And it can be an extremely different experience for different people. Newsflash. But I love the Gautona and Shai interaction. I love it because at first he is disgusted by her and by what she does. Then he evolves to realizing that she's incredibly skilled, but he still is incredibly disappointed that she does things like, you can make art. Why don't you? Why do this disgusting thing when you can do this amazing thing? It's like if you found someone who was like a perfect physical specimen and they spend it killing children instead of like winning the Olympics. Like, why? When you're like so awesome, why don't you use this for good? But I love that when she needs someone to test the stamps on, he lets them test them on test them on him. Even though he thinks this is wrong, right? He'd rather she do it to him, because he believes that if you're going to ask anybody to do it, you should be willing to do it yourself. And I think that over the process of time, this earns her respect for him. Because at first she's just like, oh, you bigot. And he's like, oh, you are a bigot, but there's actually some thought behind there. Maybe I care about your opinion. And I think at the end, one of the things that influences her to go to Ashravin is that she doesn't want to disappoint Gautona. She genuinely wants his approval. Not because she needs it, but because she sees it as something that is desirable. And we know she's had a mentor before, and that mentor mattered to her. And one of the things she says is at the end that he has affected her. He's changed her, Gautona. And she says she's going to change her get out of jail stamp, the one that is her leaving the life of forgery behind. And she's going to add a kindly old uncle who meant a lot to her. And she's literally deciding that if I ever do leave forging, I want to add your memory into that. When I forget everything else, you are now something I want to remember. And one of the things I suggest that this book is doing is it is about forging the Emperor's soul, but it's also about forging Shai's soul and Gautona's soul. And both of their souls are forged in this book and changed because of what happens in these 100 days forever. And I love that because me and you aren't going to go and magically stamp ourselves with Soulstone, but we can change our future by altering what we do now, as our actions then create a branch that leads us to a different location. And I think that's one of the big messages, if not the message, of the Emperor's Soul. That and it also is our responsibility in some cases directly, like if you're a parent or a teacher and there's someone under your authority, you need to think, what am I doing here? Because what, good or bad, you will be having an effect. Or friendship, right? But especially if you're in a position of authority and you think, I'm affecting someone else's opportunities here. Are my imprints for good or not? And what do we do with the power that's given us? So
yeah,
that's
a good point.
That's why I love
that's
this
a good
book.
point.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't even realize to the extent to which it has such an inspirational message and such an interesting moral and philosophical one as well. Yeah, that's great. I love that.
One thing I do recognize, I will say that this is probably Sanderson's best short story. It's just not my favorite. Like I could tell.
Why?
Because the writing
Because
is
of its
excellent.
I think it's like the level 3-ness, if I want to borrow another term from a different podcast.
Legendarium.
Yeah, like the level 3-ness of this story is just off the charts. Like
For sure.
totally. And I think just the complexity, like the amount that he was able to write with so few characters and to craft like this entire story is amazing. But I'm not going to say this is bad. This is definitely his best. But it's not my favorite, which is weird.
That's interesting.
I think that's totally legit. I think that's a totally legit comment.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
That's interesting because it's not my favorite either, but I do love it. But I hadn't really considered like what I would think would be the best, but not necessarily my favorite, because I guess I usually see my favorite as something that's the best. But that's a good point that you said, Dusty, because that's a good way to acknowledge like the difference between your own tastes and like the way, like just the technical aspects of the way it was executed and what it was exploring and the depth of it.
And there's some literary works that I totally respect, and I have read. I have read War and Peace. I don't know if you've read War and Peace, but
Not yet.
War and Peace is worth reading, right? But it is not entertaining. Just in case, I'm sorry to disappoint. Like it is worth reading, but it is not entertaining, in my view. I've read many books that are far more entertaining than War and Peace, far more enjoyable. But there is a reason it's a classic, and the very way it is written is part of that reason, and it does give you an insight into like Russia and the classic style, and so it's interesting. So there's a few things that really appeals to me, that I can recognize that this is excellent, but it doesn't appeal to me. Schindler's List. Let me use a movie example for those of you who may not be big readers. Schindler's List is a fantastic movie. In many ways, it's an absolute masterpiece. There's a reason it has the accolades it does, the choices, the artistic choices, the acting, but even things like the cinematography, the script writing, the plot. It is just an excellent piece of filmography. I own it. I don't watch it often. I watch it maybe once every 20 years. I think I've seen it twice in my life, but I own it. The reason I own it is because I consider it a masterpiece of filmmaking, but I don't want to watch it every weekend. No. I want to watch Endgame or Infinity War or like, The Princess Bride. I can watch that a million times. Star Wars Episode 4, bring it on.
Or the Lord of the Rings.
Well, yeah, the Lord of the Rings movies, absolutely. Just really entertaining, right down my alley. I can put them on at any time and can quote them front to back. But I wouldn't necessarily say there are better directed and acted movies than Schindler's List. I think Schindler's List as a pure piece of acting and cinematography may well be better than all of those movies I just named, but it's nowhere near as entertaining.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, it tells like a super powerful and meaningful message, right? That
really
made me think of a similar example in terms of that. I would say is the movie 12 Years a Slave, because I watched that in the movie theater, and my instant reaction after watching the movie was, that was a super powerful and amazing movie, but I never want to watch it again, because it's so much of it is about watching slaves getting tortured and treated fucking phenomenally horribly. Like, but it's such a powerful and good movie, even though I find it, and I don't have a problem with watching disturbing stuff normally, but I find it so disturbing that I don't want to watch it again, because it does such a good job of achieving its goal of showing you how horrible slavery is.
Yeah, it's like that one movie. I have the same opinion of that. I don't know the name of the movie, but one of the guys in the movie pronounces Los Angeles, Los Angeles. You know which movie I'm talking about, Andrew?
I'm not sure. There are at least a few movies where characters do that.
Well, the movie is about... Yeah, the movie is about a guy coming back, I think from the war. He goes back to like his dad's old farm. His dad's like super racist, and he has like some sharecroppers that live there. And I think at the end of the movie, one of the family members of like the sharecropping family comes back from the war. And he like got a lot of respect overseas in the European society, but he came back, and when he's back in American society, he was basically treated quite badly. And he also, I think he met a woman in Europe and like found out he had a kid, but at the end of the movie, he had the choice of either getting his tongue cut out or being castrated. Did you see that movie, Andrew? It's one of the ones we talked about a while ago.
I can't remember. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but
yeah, that's one of those movies I probably will only watch once. But it was like a very powerful movie in itself.
Yeah. And so I absolutely think that's a really good comment you made, Dusty, that you can recognize that this is an excellent piece of writing and enjoy it, but it still doesn't have to be what you consider the most enjoyable and favorite. That can be a different point. And I think that's a really good point to make to the listeners as well. Like, just because you love it doesn't mean it has, like, and like the thing is, I love my kids, right? My kids are my favorites. I think they're amazing. Love them. And I would rather have them than any others. But I can still acknowledge my kid is not always right. My kid is not the prettiest kid in the class. She is not the strongest kid in the class. And that's okay. And I think some people can lose sight of that. They're like, oh, because I love you so much, therefore you must be the best at everything and never wrong. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't take that. It's good to be, in a way, your praise of something matters even more when you can acknowledge its faults and still say, I think it's great. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I feel that way. Guys. I feel that way about the new Matrix movie, because I've made my own video about that. I made my own video about it and did a podcast about it yesterday. And
no spoilers.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't like it, but I keep basically putting forward the point that I certainly acknowledge that there are a lot of flaws in the way it was executed, but I still like it, and I like it overall.
And that's good. And that's definitely the way to be. And after Matrix movie 1, no one was ever going to be happy with the Matrix movie again.
No.
Because
I like
nailed it.
I like all 4 of them.
Yep. But am I right that the first one is the best, even for you?
Yeah, even for me. Yeah, that's the only one I give 10 out of 10.
But they're all good. I enjoy all of them as movies, and I think a lot of them do. They all do what the first one did, in that they try and make you think, they challenge perception, and they have cool visual scenes that are just epic to watch and great fight moments. And
For
like,
sure.
yeah. But the first one was just so self-encapsulating. It's hard to beat. It's hard to beat.
It really is.
Comparison again, right? Comparisons. Anyway, any final thoughts on Emperor's Soul, guys, or are we out? I would just say, for those watching, if you have someone who isn't really sure about Brandon Sanderson, doesn't really know if they want to dive into a 1,000-page book, and you're like, but this guy's a great writer, they should try him. Emperor's Soul can be a really interesting one, because you don't need knowledge of the Cosmere to enjoy it. It is short. It is a really good example of his writing skill. And it also has a hard magic system. So if people are like, oh, I love this forgery stuff, I wish more people wrote magic like this. Like, oh, allow me to show you the Cosmere. And then you can go there. But it doesn't require that sort of buy-in that something like Stormlight Archive requires. If like, I know some people who won't start Stormlight Archive because they've seen how thick the books are. And they've read them, right, 10 of them. And they're like, I'll be dead before I get to the end of that. And I'm like, even if you only ever read The Way of Kings, it's worth it. But they don't believe me. So I've used some people say start with Mistborn. I often encourage people to start with Emperor's Soul, because then you get the beginning.
It's even shorter.
Straight away. Oh, it's much shorter because it's not a trilogy. And you get a full story, because one of the things Brandon is the best at is endings. My goodness, the endings pull it all together. And Emperor's Soul is a really good advert for reading Brandon Sanderson, in my opinion.
I love books so much that when I see a big, thick one, I get excited. I'm like, ooh, a long, awesome book.
This is going to keep me interested for a bit more than like 20 seconds as I listen to it on times 4 speed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. So, so I guess you actually let's end by ranking all three of these stories in comparison to each other. So far, I know that your favorite out of the three that we're going to talk about, Tristram, is Emperor's Soul, and we're also talking about Silence for Shadows in the Forest of Hell, which is my pick, and Six of the Dusk, which is Dusty's pick. Without getting into any of the other stories at all, because we're going to do separate chats on those, what would you say is your second favorite and third favorite?
Of those, Six of the Dusk is definitely my next, and Shadows will be third. But I love Shadows. I'm going to really enjoy talking about that. But the thing is that they're done in different kinds of styles. Like if this is a heist escape novel, like Six of the Dusk is more like savage meets civilized, and like almost like a survivalist book. And Shadows of Silence has a real like horror aspect to it, like a legitimate horror, but also like folklore, if I can put it that way, like Brothers Grimm, the original stuff, and
like the rules that you have to follow in the forest.
Yeah. Also has a frontier and western feel to it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like founding a new land. Absolutely. And so I think the style of Six of the Dusk appeals to me. I also like that Six of the Dusk kind of flips it a little bit on its head at the end. The ending of Six of the Dusk is so good.
It's really crazy.
I thought that like the journey through most of the book was going to be the story. So the ending, like I'm a sucker for this, right? Because Brandon Sanderson tricks me every time. Like I don't even try to outthink him. I just fall into his plots, and then when he does his surprises, I'm always like, oh, and I want that experience. I don't really want to outguess him. I enjoy being shocked and just loving the surprises. And Six of the Dusk completely was different than what I thought it was going to be, and I loved it. And so I would say Sixth of the Dusk is my next, and Shadows of Silence is my third. But I wouldn't place any of those books at under like a 6. I would consider all of them to be good to excellent. However, there's very few books I would give a 10 in the entire world. Like when I say 10, I mean not only did I thoroughly enjoy it, but that I think that plotting wise, character wise, that it's pretty much on the money in every area. But The Emperor's Soul is such a book for me. The characters in it appeal to me in every level, and it's so tight. The plotting in it is so tight. There is just, I honestly can't think of what I wish he'd done differently. Like, there's the part of me that goes, oh, I wish it was longer, but I don't really. I think the fact that it's so short and tight is one of the reasons I absolutely adore it, because it's a skill to do a lot with very few words. That's a skill, and it's not a skill I have, as has been evidenced on these transmissions. But I can respect it, and so I 10 out of 10 for this one for me, and I'll give the others when we do them.
Yeah, I love short stories for that reason too, because they like, it can be such an amazing skill to pack that much stuff and so much excitement into his short stories. That's why, like, for my own fiction writing that I do, that's my favorite type of fiction writing, to do a short story, but partially because it doesn't take that much commitment. I can sit down and do one draft in one sitting, and then in the other sessions I can do editing instead of especially if if you're writing a book, you have to keep so much in your head. I learned that the hard way, that and I don't see how, like, especially a lot of the fantasy authors that we read, they must have like some detailed notes somewhere to keep.
Oh yeah, like Sanderson has a wiki, and someone that manages that wiki for him. That's how much stuff he needs to rely on.
He employs two people as continuity editors who literally just check that he's making sense with himself. But the thing that's cool is that, like, I love the fact that whenever I find out about Dragonsteel, it's all like people who used to do it for free. Like, they're his buddies, and they're like, oh, I helped him draw some stuff. And he's like, hey, I have enough money to pay you now. Can I give you a job? It's like, do you remember when you used to edit all my work for free? Like, yeah, like, can I employ you? Can I employ your wife? That's so Mormon as well. Like, I'm just going to employ your wife and now your children. We'll employ you as family units. Like, I love that. I love the fact that, like, Dan Wells' daughter, like, works in his bookshop. He's like, Sanderson, you beast. He's just classic. He's so wholesome. Sometimes I wonder if he's entirely real. Like, he is legitimately wholesome guy. What do you rate? What would you rate Emperor's Soul, guys?
You go first, Dusty.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's really hard. Like, I almost feel that they're tied, but of course, top pick is Six of Dust. I think I like it the most out of the three because it has a cliffhanger ending.
It's got a good ending.
Yeah. And that has, like, implications of it being, revisited in the future.
Yep.
Shoot, I'll have to, just on the pure mastery of it, I think I'm gonna have to put Emperor's Soul in the second slot. I really appreciate it as, wow, he did everything right. Like, I can't even find any flaws in the story. Like, I have nothing to complain about, really, in that. Like, there's no characters that made me mad or anything. When I say made me mad, sometimes I get angry when characters make what seem like dumb decisions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Preaching to the choir.
Yeah, that's just, hey, people make dumb decisions in real life. Yeah, so it happens. But yeah, I would have to say Shadows is definitely a really good story.
Yeah, cool.
I like it. But does it have flaws? I guess it probably does. I really haven't examined it that closely. But I'm like, it has a really interesting magic system. But none of the characters are magically imbued, unlike the other two. Well, the Six of Dust the magic is within the.
Well, we'll get to that in Six of Dust.
Yeah, it's in a different, because the person themselves is Emperor's Soul.
Yeah.
And 6, they have access to things that aren't their own. And in Shadows, it's like they're dealing with the magic system.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
That's
like something they control. It's something that they have to survive.
That's one of the things I like about it. That like you're in a magical world, but you don't have magic powers, and you have to get these special weapons. It's like you're a vampire hunter.
Yeah, it does have a very Vampire Hunter feel to it, like Vampire Hunter Western frontier. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Gunslinger, a little bit of other Western fantasy worlds, like just that kind of aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I just love Six of Dust because it's like a survival-ish, horror-ish type of tale where everywhere you step is like certain death. And the main character is just kind of antisocial as hell, if I can say, basically, and how that flaw completely inhibits him towards the end of the movie, or not movie, the book. It's a really interesting tale. I think out of all the characters, I don't know, he has like the most flaws, it seems like.
He's not a criminal.
Maybe they're all flawed, and criminal is like, what is a criminal? Like
Shy is a criminal.
Well, yeah, but a criminal is who those in power deem to be doing the wrong thing.
Oh, now we're getting meta.
Yep.
I don't exactly think she's doing all that wrong in her universe, to be honest.
Even though she went and stole the crown jewels on purpose and left a fake.
Well, you could say the same thing about the main character in Silence for Shadows in the Forest of Hell. Silence, because she's literally a bounty hunter, but she's a bounty hunter to escape other bounty hunters.
Yeah, and that particular bounty is very, very personal. The one that she goes after.
But all I'm saying is, they're all flawed in just different ways.
Yeah, flawed in different ways. I think the flaws of the character from Six of Dust are more like my own flaws, I think.
Right.
Are very similar to my own. This is probably why I like that character a lot.
That makes sense.
Agreed.
All right. Yeah, Andrew? So obviously for me, my favorite of the three is Six of the Dusk, partially because even though my absolute favorite movie and book are not in these genres, my favorite genres, I would have to say, are fantasy horror and fantasy sci-fi. Like the original Alien movie, for example, fantasy sci-fi, and this story, Silence for Shadows in the Forest of Hell, is like, it's probably, I haven't even read that many fantasy horror fantasy stories, but it's definitely the favorite one of those that I've read before. And like I said, I love the fantasy horror, and how it's like Silence is a vampire hunter, and she has to go into this evil forest, and you have to follow all of these rules, otherwise the ghosts will get you. And yeah, I just love, I love, you guys know I love the violence in combat the most, which is part of why that one's my favorite of the three too. And I would say that Six of the Dusk is actually my second favorite, because it's so interesting, the story and the way the magic system works, and how it has a cliffhanger ending, like you said, Dusty. But like similarly as the same as with you guys too, I really love all three of these stories too. Like I'm pretty sure I gave all three of them 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. And as almost always happens when I reread anything by Brandon Sanderson, I like it even more the second time because I forgot when you had mentioned it before, Tristram, you were suggesting that we do a chat on each of these novellas / short stories. And obviously that was a good idea because we talked about this one for 2 hours. And part of that was because I forgot how detailed they get and how much we get into the characters and the intricacies of the magic system and everything that's happening with the plot. And yeah, I love that, as I've discovered in this conversation today, as I said, that there's even more redeeming to the Emperor's Soul than I noticed even in my second reading too. And because you love it so much, it helped me see more of that too. So yeah, all three of them are great. Even though we all rank them slightly differently, we all love all three of them too. So that's great.
I've read all of them multiple times, and that's one of the things that tells you straight away, right? If someone's prepared to go back and read something they've already read, that tells you something about, they see that as worthwhile and valuable.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to ask a question because I don't know if you guys have. Well, I know Andrew has read this. Did you find any parallels between the Emperor's Soul and Speaker for the Dead?
Speaker for the Dead?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Is that the second Ender's Game
one?
Yeah, because
the one where he goes
I'm
to the
thinking,
family and then he helps them understand all the things that went wrong in the guy who's died, and through understanding him,
so it's almost like
themselves.
That's
their
a good
jobs
point. Yeah.
are very similar. Like she goes and tries to understand a person based off of what she thinks is the truth of that person. And it's kind of similar to what the Speaker of the Dead does, where they go and they find out the truth of that person's life rather than like how that person was perceived by everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, that's a good point.
I would say there is a parallel, but I would say there's a lot more that is the tone of the two books is very different, isn't it?
Oh no, yeah, it's hardcore sci-fi in one book.
But not only that, but like the Speaker for the Dead has a very I don't know if this is the right word, doleful tone. Like it's quite sad. I think a lot of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's
like and it's a little bit like everyone kind of sees it's a bit hostile to him at first, and then it's only over time that they realize. And one of the things he does is he actually just pulls away all the lies, doesn't he? And goes like with blatant, brutal truth, and then that hurts. But then they realize they needed that to be able to properly be able to accept that this guy who's died was a bit horrible, but actually had redeeming features, and that really they all understand themselves better through that process. I agree in that aspect. There is a parallel here that I had not considered, because understanding properly what's happened. But I think one of the biggest things that changes it is the most obvious thing. One is that in one, he ain't coming back. So It's all about the forging of the people who are left, all about the impact that his life had on them, and by removing the lies. This one isn't really about lies except for Shy. Shy is living a lie within a lie within a lie, which is actually the truth. But the lie isn't about Ashravin, like the guy who's died. We never change what we think about him. Well, sorry. We never change what he did. What he did stands. We all knew what he did. It's a matter of public record, and it doesn't change. And Gautona isn't shocked by the revelations. There's no revelations about his life. Like when she studies him, she doesn't like change and say, here's some facts you didn't know, because everyone knows it. But what she does is, it's because Ashravin lives. That's the key thing, because he lives and is able to change going forward. It changes the tone. But I would never have considered that comparison. So thank you very much for bringing it up. I now need to go and reread Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead again. After I read everything that was ever written by flipping, I need to read like the rest of flipping Abercrombie, and don't even get me started on the Dresden Files. So at the end of all of that, I've got to go reread Ender's Game now. Dang it.
You know how we're, Dusty, how we were going to do a crossover series of our two book chat groups, you and I and Parker, and you and I and Tristram, about the Harry Potter series. We should do that with the Enders. We should do that with the Enders series at some point too, because Dusty and Parker and I kind of do more sci-fi chats, and then with you we do more like fantasy. So we should do that.
No, but that's a good call, Andrew. Like, my knowledge of the Ender's Game, I've read Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead once each, ever in my life. So I don't have the I'm not at your guys' spot in those.
Well, I've only read it once.
Yeah, I've read all of the books once. I think Dusty's only read them once too. I think you've read all of them too, right, Dusty?
Well, I've not finished like the other stuff, but like the main series, yeah, I've read it once.
Bean's books? Have you read the books on Bean?
Yeah,
I've read one of Bean's books.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you had read it. I read like I don't know, like 15 books or however many there are in the 3 or 4 different series.
Right.
Yeah, I need to catch up to you, but
I haven't read all of them, man. I've read 4.
Yeah,
I still like I think there's a 5th one that's considered part of the original series. I like the original series the most.
Yeah, I really loved Ender's Game itself, and I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Speaker for the Dead. Like, I thought I'm not gonna really, when they weren't in the academy, and I was like, oh, that was kind of what I loved. But then it was just so good. It was just really well written. I'm like, oh,
I think the
this guy's a good writer. Who knew?
I think the 3rd one is my favorite in the series. That's where some really interesting sci-fi stuff happens. But the 1st one is definitely awesome too.
But we should probably bring this particular episode to a close as we go off on yet our 3rd crazy awesome track. But Emperor's Soul, good book. Yay.
Certainly is. I think we all highly recommend it, and all of the short stories and novellas in Brandon Sanderson's Arcanum Unbounded, and you can get a whole bunch of them separately too. Like, you can get Secret History, which we already talked about separately, and I think you can maybe get separately. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think you can get all of the 3 that we're talking about at least separately too.
I think every single one you can get separate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
and there's even like I don't know if you're aware, but he also released a YA series, Skyward, that he's just put out recently.
Oh yeah, that's one that I've wanted to get into. I've been thinking that I wanted to get into that because it's his like YA sci-fi series. Is that it?
And it is. But one of the things he's done is, like, Brandon Sanderson loves breaking ideas and like trying something new. So this time, what he did is he released 4 novellas along with this 3rd book that he used another writer to co-write with him so he could get them out. And so the novellas are each from the point of view of one of the smaller characters in the books.
Oh, cool.
Leading up to. So he's like, you get one member of the flight, then another member of the flight, then another member of the flight. It's all chronological. Then you get book 3. Then you get the 4th novella after that, because it's obviously revealing stuff that happens at the end of book 3. And then he's going to do that again with book 4. So he's like using these novellas to promote and inform and like give almost deleted scenes to his novels. And I think he's experimenting with how that works economically. But because that's all gone so well, he once wrote a short story set in the same world way before he actually came up with the novels, called Defending Elysium. You didn't used to be able to get that separately. Now that is available on Kindle as its own thing.
What's it called again? You cut out a little bit there.
Defending Elysium.
Okay.
Which was that was the first short story he did that was set in this universe. And then he's like, oh, I want to write, a YA sci-fi. Oh, I'll set it in the same universe as that. And then he goes and does a full story. So,
well, how YA is it? Because I'm interested, and just wondering if it's like super YA like Alcatraz, or
No.
like mildly YA like Rhythmatist?
Yeah, it's not. I would say Rhythmatist is grade school, as is Alcatraz. I wouldn't really say they're YA. I think this is more YA on the level of something like, when I think YA Skyward, I'm thinking more the age group that are looking at stuff like Hunger Games, right? It's
Right.
it's more for your older teenagers and above. Like I would happily let my 10-year-old read Alcatraz. She wouldn't get all the jokes, but she would enjoy Alcatraz and the Rhythmatist. I don't think she'd enjoy Skyward. Not yet. Okay. She needs a few more years. And there's like both the Rhythmatist and like Alcatraz, for example, they don't really explore romantic relationships because those characters are still a bit too young to be interested. But they hinted it as it develops. But like Skyward clearly does that, and Skyward is more violent because you're literally shooting people out of the sky. And it's like very much there is an alien race, they're coming to kill us. And Spencer, who is the main character, is very much a warrior. Like she may be a pilot, but she's in the warrior line of pilots. Like she sees herself as a warrior, and it's very much that way. Okay. I highly recommend them. I think you would enjoy them. They are written, I would say, at an adult level, but like the character is a young female protagonist, which is probably one of the reasons I think of it as YA. It's definitely sci-fi, but it is not hard sci-fi. It's got a bit of rule of cool in it, and there is a magic system because it's Brandon Sanderson and he can't help himself.
That's awesome. But yeah, I've definitely been wanting to read. I
genuinely think you'll enjoy it, guys. I genuinely think you'll enjoy it. Read Skyward first. Don't read any of the novellas or anything. Read Skyward first, because Skyward has reveals in it that will, like, I think even if you read Defending Elysium, even though it's set in the past, I think it spoils a bit of Skyward if you read that first. So my genuine thing is when you do, read Skyward first.
For sure.
Okay. I think I have it. I just haven't read it or listened to it.
Dusty,
you can send it to me too, Dusty.
Yeah, it's just like I like to jump around a bit, so I have to
jump around.
I don't want to burn all of my Sanderson all in one go.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm reading Abercrombie at the moment. Just finished The Trouble with Peace, and yet again the guys are fucking genius.
You're ahead of me, man. I haven't gotten that far.
I just read A Little Hatred that you sent me recently.
No, that's
awesome.
That's the wrong name. That's the wrong name. It's the first one in the second trilogy.
A Little Hatred?
Best Served Cold. Sorry, Best Served Cold.
Oh, you're doing the one-off.
Standalone. Yeah.
Is that
that one's
I thought that was the first of the second trilogy.
No, it's the first of the standalone.
The standalones are what, 4?
That's what it is. Yeah,
they're all chronological, like in the world of.
We need to end this program.
They do take place after the first series, but I want to get into the standalones after we talk about these Brandon Sanderson short stories anyway. But yeah, we can end it here. I know you need to get to bed, Tristram.
I'm the one causing the problem. I'm not complaining about you guys. I need to stop myself going off on tangents.
Yeah, no problem, man. We love tangents. So, thanks for talking, guys. It was fun to nerd out about this Brandon Sanderson story and fantasy, as always. And thanks to everyone for watching. And next time, I think you had said before we started this, Tristram, we could talk about Silence for Shadows in the Forests of Hell next time, if that's cool with you guys. I think in maybe another couple of weeks or so, because Parker's been really excited to talk about the drawing of the 3 with us, Dusty, the second book in Stephen King's Dark Tower series. So
such a weird book.
It really is weird. Yeah, I want to talk. So we should talk about that next week, and then maybe we could talk about Silence for Shadows the week after that, or maybe a couple weeks after that, and maybe depending on how far you are in the next Wheel of Time book, maybe we could talk about that before we talk about the next Brandon Sanderson story. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, that works for me, man.
But yeah, so thanks everyone for watching. Click that like button, subscribe, click the bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. And yeah, so like I said, next weekend we'll talk about The Drawing of the Three, the second book in Stephen King's Dark Tower series. Got a few other chats coming up as well. And thanks a lot for checking out my Patreon, which is in the description of the video, as always. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And read Emperor's Soul, Silence for Shadows in the Forest of Hell, Six of the Dusk, everything in Arcanum Unbounded, and anything else you want to read by Brandon Sanderson. It's all great stuff. And check out Dusty's channel as well, Woke Centrist, where we also talk all the time. And we just talked about the new and first season of Wheel of Time, and we did a deep dive into every episode. And yeah, anything else you guys want to say before we end it there?
Yeah, I know we had the conflict in scheduling, but next week we'll try to get to Sword of Truth 3.
Yes.
Called Blood of the Fold. He's shaking his head.
It's not a good book.
No, it's not, but
I own them all. I'm shaking my head, but I own the entire series. I gave him my money and I read them all, so but
yeah, it's so weird.
It's not the Emperor's Soul, put it that way.
Yeah,
definitely not as good as the second book. I'll say that, but
yeah,
we'll talk about that next
week, right?
Next week.
All right, yeah. So look forward to that too. All right, and thanks again, guys, and adios until next time, everyone.